There are moments in your life that split everything into before and after. Moments so sharp, so electric, they carve a line straight through your chest, and everything you thought you knew about yourself gets rewritten in an instant. For Callista Stormfang, that moment happened on a rooftop in Miami, under a sky bruised purple with twilight, when she locked eyes with a man whose gaze burned hotter than the Florida sun. And realized, too late, that she just made the most dangerous mistake of her life. But let's back up. Because this story doesn't start with romance. It starts with survival. Callista was 38 years old, standing in 4-inch heels she couldn't afford, managing an event she was wildly underqualified for, trying desperately to hold together the shattered pieces of a business that was bleeding money faster than she could patch the wounds. Her divorce had been finalized 6 months prior. 15 years of marriage dissolved in a courtroom that smelled like old coffee and regret. Her ex-husband had taken the house, the savings, and every ounce of her confidence. What he'd left behind was a woman who'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. So when the charity concert gig landed in her inbox, a last-minute replacement for a coordinator who'd bailed 48 hours before showtime, Callista didn't hesitate. She packed a bag, booked a one-way flight from Chicago to Miami, and told herself this was it. This was her comeback. The venue was breathtaking. A private rooftop overlooking Biscayne Bay, strung with thousands of Edison bulbs that flickered like fallen stars. The crowd was Miami's elite. Tech moguls in custom suits, socialites dripping in diamonds, influencers angling for the perfect shot against the waterfront skyline. Callista moved through them like a ghost, clipboard in hand, earpiece buzzing with vendor updates, her mind running calculations she couldn't afford to get wrong. She was good at being invisible. She'd perfected it during her marriage. But then the champagne tower happened. Callista had been balancing 3 things at once. A phone call with a caterer, a lighting issue near the stage, and a tray of champagne flutes she was repositioning because the waitstaff was understaffed and she refused to let this night fall apart. She didn't see him approaching. Didn't hear the footsteps that moved with the kind of predatory grace that makes the hairs on your neck stand up. She turned, collided, and watched in slow-motion horror as an entire tray of champagne, golden, expensive, catastrophic, arced through the air and splashed across the front of the most beautiful man she'd ever seen.
No.
Not beautiful. Devastating. He stood there, 6'3" of controlled fury, champagne dripping from a suit that probably cost more than her rent, and for a heartbeat, the entire rooftop went silent. The music kept playing. People kept talking. But in Callista's world, everything narrowed to this: the man in front of her, and the way his eyes, amber, molten, impossibly bright, locked onto hers with an intensity that stole the oxygen from her lungs. She started, words tangling in her throat. I'm so sorry I didn't. He moved. Not away. Closer. One step. Then another. Deliberate. Unhurried. Like a wolf closing in on prey that had just realized it was trapped. Callista's pulse hammered. She should have stepped back. Should have apologized again. Offered to pay for the dry cleaning. Done literally anything other than stand there frozen while this stranger invaded her space with the kind of presence that rewrote the air between them. But she didn't move.
Couldn't.
Because when he reached out, slowly, deliberately, and caught her wrist in his hand, the touch sent a shockwave straight through her body. His grip wasn't painful. It was absolute. The kind of hold that said I could break you but I won't, and somehow that was more terrifying than violence. You, he said, and his voice was low, rough, the kind of sound that vibrated in your chest and stayed there. Don't move. Callista's breath hitched. Up close, he was even more unsettling. Sharp cheekbones. A jaw that could have been carved from stone. Dark hair that fell just slightly too long, brushing the collar of his ruined suit. But it was his eyes that undid her. Golden amber, burning with something that wasn't quite human, and fixed on her like she was the only thing in the world worth looking at. I'll pay for the suit, she managed, hating how her voice shook. Whatever it costs, I don't want your money. The words were a blade.
Clean.
Final. Then what do you want? His lips curved. Not a smile. Something darker. Hungrier. Your name. Callista blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. Around them, the party had started moving again, people pretending not to stare, conversations resuming in hushed tones. But in this moment, in this pocket of space between them, the world had shrunk to two. Callista, she whispered. Callista Stormfang. Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Recognition? It was gone before she could name it. Asterian Darkmoon. The name hit her like a punch. She knew that name. Everyone in the events industry knew that name. Asterian Darkmoon. Reclusive billionaire, tech innovator, the man who'd bought half of downtown Miami and never gave interviews. The man whose face appeared in Forbes articles but never at social functions. The man who was supposed to be the guest of honor tonight. And she'd just drenched him in champagne. Panic flared hot in her chest. This was it. Her career was over. Whatever slim chance she'd had at salvaging her business had just evaporated along with her dignity. But Asterian didn't let go of her wrist. If anything, his grip tightened, just slightly, just enough to keep her tethered. You're managing this event, he said. Not a question. A statement. Yes. Then you're coming with me.
What?
No, I can't just leave, I have to. Callista. Her name in his mouth was a command and a caress all at once. You can finish managing this event and spend the rest of your night wondering if you just destroyed your career. Or you can get in my car, let me take you somewhere we can talk privately, and find out why I'm not angry. She stared at him, searched his face for a trap, a trick, some hint of what game he was playing. But all she found was intensity, raw, unfiltered, dangerous. Why aren't you angry? She asked. His smile this time was real, devastating. Because the moment you touched me, everything changed. Before Callista could process those words, a midnight black Rolls-Royce pulled up to the rooftop entrance. A driver emerged, opened the rear door, and stood waiting. Asterian released her wrist, took a step back, gave her space to choose. Get in the car, Callista Stormfang, he said quietly. Or spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you had. Every rational part of her brain screamed no. This was insane. Reckless. The kind of decision that women in horror movies made right before everything went catastrophically wrong. But Callista had spent 15 years making safe choices. Playing by the rules. Shrinking herself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold her. And where had it gotten her?
Divorced. Broke.
Invisible. So when Asterian Darkmoon extended his hand, champagne-stained, powerful, impossible to refuse, Callista Stormfang made the most dangerous choice of her life. She took it. And climbed into the car that would change everything. Because some meetings aren't written in the stars. They're written in blood, moonlight, and a promise neither of you can escape. Even if you wanted to. Especially if you wanted to. This is the story of what happened next. And trust me, you won't believe where it goes. Chapter 1. The door of the Rolls-Royce closed behind Callista with a sound that felt far too final. Like the sealing of a tomb, or maybe a fate she'd been running toward her entire life without knowing it. The interior smelled like leather and something else. Something wild. Cedar and smoke and night air, as if the man beside her carried the forest in his skin. Asterian didn't speak. He sat across from her in the dim cabin, one arm draped casually along the window ledge, his ruined suit somehow making him look more powerful instead of less. The champagne stain spread dark across his chest, but he didn't seem to notice. Or care. His attention was fixed entirely on her, and Callista felt it like a physical weight. Heavy, inescapable, burning straight through every defense she'd ever built. The car pulled away from the rooftop, gliding into Miami's neon-soaked streets, and Callista's heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. Say something, her brain screamed. Ask where you're going. Demand answers. Do literally anything other than sit here drowning in the most unsettling silence of your life. But when she opened her mouth, what came out wasn't a question. It was a confession. I don't do this. Asterian's gaze didn't waver. Do what? Get into cars with strangers. Follow men I don't know to places I've never been. Her fingers twisted in her lap, nails digging into her palms. I'm not reckless. No, he agreed, and there was something almost amused in his voice. You're not. Then why did I just do it? The question hung between them, raw and exposed. Callista hated how vulnerable it made her sound, hated that she'd asked it at all. But she needed to understand, needed to know why every survival instinct she possessed had short-circuited the moment this man told her to get in the car. Asterian leaned forward, not much, just enough to close the distance, and suddenly the space between them felt microscopic. Dangerous. Because you felt it too, he said quietly. Felt what? The pull. 2 words. That's all it took to unravel her. Because he was right. From the moment their eyes had met on that rooftop, something had shifted inside Callista, something deep and primal and utterly terrifying. It wasn't attraction, though God knows he was attractive enough to make her forget how to breathe. It was recognition. Like her body knew him, even though her mind had never seen his face before. Like every cell in her body had been waiting for this exact moment, this exact man, and now that he was here, there was no going back. I don't understand, she whispered. You will. The car turned onto a private road, leaving the glittering chaos of Miami behind. Callista glanced out the window and saw they were heading toward the coast, toward the part of the city where buildings touched the sky and mortals like her didn't belong. Where are we going? My home. Her pulse spiked. That's not. You can't just. Callista. Her name again, spoken like a prayer and a warning. Look at me.
She did.
God help her, she did. And what she saw in his eyes stole the protest right off her tongue. There was hunger there, not the kind that wanted to consume, though that was there too, buried beneath layers of control, so tight it looked painful. No, this was different. This was need, raw and desperate, and so achingly human it made her chest hurt. I'm not going to hurt you, Asterian said, and his voice had gone rough. Unsteady. But I need you to trust me. Just for tonight. Just long enough for me to explain why you're not safe anymore. The words landed like ice water. Not safe? What are you talking about? The moment you touched me, he stopped. Jaw clenched. Started again. The moment we made contact in front of that crowd, you became visible. And in my world, visibility is the most dangerous thing you can be. Callista's mind spun. This wasn't making sense. None of it made sense. She was nobody. A failed event coordinator from Chicago with maxed-out credit cards and a daughter in college she could barely afford to support. What possible reason could there be for her to be in danger? Unless this man wasn't who he appeared to be. The thought crystallized slowly, like frost creeping across glass. She studied him, really studied him. The way he held himself, coiled and predatory even in stillness. The way his eyes caught the light wrong, flashing gold when headlights swept past. The way he breathed, slower and deeper than any human should, like he was constantly measuring the air for threats. What are you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Something dark and satisfied crossed Asterian's face. Smart woman. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. But it's the right question. The Rolls-Royce pulled through wrought iron gates that opened on silent hinges, gliding into an underground parking structure that looked more like a vault than a garage. Sleek. Sterile. Built to keep things in. Or out. The car stopped. Asterian didn't move to open the door. Instead, he held her gaze, and Callista saw something shift behind his eyes, a flicker of something inhuman, something that made her hindbrain scream predator even as her body leaned closer. Before we go inside, he said carefully, I need you to understand something. Once I tell you the truth, you can't unknow it. Your life will change. Permanently. So, I'm giving you one last chance to walk away. Callista's throat tightened. And if I do, I'll have my driver take you back to your hotel. You'll finish the event. Fly home to Chicago. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what you missed. And if I stay? His smile was blade-sharp and heartbreaking all at once. Then you'll discover that monsters are real. And some of them wear expensive suits and buy you champagne to replace the bottle you spilled. Callista should have been terrified. Should have demanded he let her out immediately. Should have run screaming back to the safe, small life she'd been trying to rebuild. But instead, she thought about the past 15 years. Thought about shrinking herself to fit into a marriage that never wanted her whole. Thought about playing it safe, playing it small, playing the role of a woman who'd forgotten she was allowed to want things that set her soul on fire. And she realized something that changed everything. She was done playing it safe. "Tell me," Callista said, and her voice didn't shake. "Tell me what you are." Asterian's eyes flashed gold, burning, utterly inhuman. And when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a secret that would shatter her world. "I'm a werewolf, Callista. An alpha. And the moment you walked into my line of sight tonight, something inside me woke up that's been dormant for 15 years. The air left her lungs." He kept going, relentless. "My kind. We don't choose our mates. We recognize them. The way a compass finds north. The way the moon pulls the tide. And whether you believe me or not, whether you understand it or not." He leaned in, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his skin. "You're mine. And every wolf in this city will know it by morning."
Callista stared at him.
Werewolf.
Alpha. Mate.
Words that belonged in fantasy novels, not in the back of a luxury car in downtown Miami. But the thing was, she believed him, not because it made sense, not because it was logical or rational or anything her brain could process, but because her body already knew, had known from the moment their eyes met. "Prove it," she whispered. Asterian's smile was equal parts dangerous and relieved. "Hold on to something," he said. And then his eyes went full wolf gold, and Callista Stormfang's ordinary life ended forever. Chapter 2. The elevator rose in silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes you hyper-aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every impossible thing that just happened in the car below. Callista's reflection stared back at her from the polished steel walls. She looked the same. Same dark hair falling loose from its clip. Same mascara smudged under one eye from the humidity. Same woman who'd boarded a plane from Chicago 36 hours ago thinking she was going to save her business. But everything had changed. The numbers climbed.
20, 30, 40.
Asterian stood beside her, hands in his pockets, perfectly still. But Callista could feel the tension radiating off him in waves, coiled energy barely contained, like a storm trapped inside human skin. When the elevator finally stopped at the penthouse level, the doors opened with a whisper. And Callista forgot how to breathe. The space before her wasn't a home. It was a statement. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around three sides, offering a panoramic view of Miami's coastline, the ocean stretching black and infinite under a crescent moon, the city lights glittering like broken glass scattered across velvet. The interior was all clean lines and brutal elegance. Steel beams. Concrete floors polished to a mirror shine. Furniture that looked like it cost more than her yearly salary. Modern art on the walls, abstract pieces in crimson and black that felt more like warnings than decoration. But it was the silence that unsettled her most. No hum of electronics. No distant traffic. Just the sound of waves crashing 40 floors below and the deliberate rhythm of Asterian's breathing. "Come in," he said quietly, and it wasn't a request. Callista's heels clicked against the concrete as she stepped inside. The elevator doors closed behind her with a finality that made her stomach clench. She was alone. With him. In a fortress built to keep the world out. Or keep something in. Asterian moved to the bar, a sleek obsidian counter that reflected the moonlight, and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Amber liquid, expensive, the kind that burned smooth. He slid one across to her.
"Drink," he said.
"I don't, Callista." His eyes found hers, and they were still that unnatural gold. Still wrong in all the ways that made her pulse spike. You're about to learn things that will rewrite everything you thought you knew about the world. Trust me, you'll want the whiskey. She picked up the glass, took a sip. The burn steadied her, just slightly. Asterion didn't touch his own drink. Instead, he circled around the bar, maintaining distance but never breaking eye contact, and Callista realized with sudden clarity what she was watching. A predator, assessing, calculating, deciding how much truth she could handle. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, and was proud her voice didn't shake. "Because in the car, you asked me to prove what I am. And I can't do that in public. So prove it now." His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Careful what you ask for." But Callista was done being careful, done playing small. She set the glass down with a click that echoed too loud in the cavernous space. "You said I was in danger. You said I became visible. I need to understand what that means." Asterion's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he just stared at her, and Callista saw the war happening behind his eyes. Whatever he was about to tell her, it cost him something. Finally he spoke. "I'm not like other men, Callista. I'm not even fully human anymore." He moved to the windows, silhouette framed against the night. "I'm a werewolf. An alpha. I control a pack of 43 wolves who operate in the shadows of this city's business world. We're not the monsters from folklore, we don't who. And humans, we don't turn people against their will. But we are territorial, dangerous. And right now we're at war." The words settled over her like ice water.
War.
With who? A rival pack, led by an alpha named Vex Silverclaw. Asterion's hands curled into fists at his sides. "He's been trying to take Miami from me for the past 3 years. Attacks on my businesses. Threats to my pack members. A slow, calculated campaign to weaken my position until he can challenge me directly." Callista's mind raced. This was insane. Werewolves. Territory wars. Things that belonged in movies, not in a penthouse overlooking Biscayne Bay. But the man in front of her wasn't lying. She could see it in every tense line of his body. "What does this have to do with me?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Asterion turned. The moonlight caught his face, throwing shadows across features too beautiful to be safe. "When you touched me tonight. When we made contact in front of that crowd, something happened. Something I didn't anticipate." He took a step closer. "Wolves recognize their mates through scent, through instinct. It's not a choice. It's biology.
Fate.
Whatever you want to call it. And the moment your skin touched mine, every wolf within 100 yards knew exactly what you were to me."
Mate.
The word hung between them like a live wire. "That's impossible," Callista whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Asterion moved closer, slow and deliberate. "Tell me you didn't feel it. Tell me your body didn't recognize something the moment our eyes met. Tell me you can explain why you got in that car, even though every rational part of your brain screamed at you to run." She couldn't, because he was right. Vex has spies everywhere, Asterion continued, and his voice had gone rough.
Raw.
"By now, he knows I made contact with a human woman at a public event. He knows I brought you here. And he'll assume exactly what's true, that you matter to me, which makes you the perfect target." Fear spiked cold in Callista's chest. Target for what? To hurt me, to draw me out, to create a weakness he can exploit. Asterion's eyes blazed. "Vex doesn't fight fair. If he thinks taking you will break me, he'll do it without hesitation." "Then why did you bring me here?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "If I'm in danger because of you, why drag me deeper into this?" "Because the alternative is worse." "How could it possibly be worse?" Asterion closed the distance between them in 2 strides, and suddenly he was right there, close enough that Callista could feel the heat pouring off his skin, could smell cedar and smoke and something wild that made her head spin. "Because Vex doesn't need me to confirm you're important," he said, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "He just needs to believe it. Which means whether you're with me or not, you're already a target. The only question is whether you face it alone, or whether you let me protect you." Callista's heart hammered against her ribs. You're saying I don't have a choice. You have two choices. His gaze held hers, unflinching. Let me protect you. Stay here, where my pack can keep you safe, until I neutralize the threat. Or go home to Chicago and pray they don't find you first. The words landed like stones. She thought about her apartment back home. Thought about Bryn, her daughter, away at college. Thought about the life she'd been trying to rebuild, brick by fragile brick. And realized with sickening clarity that it was already too late. They're already watching me, aren't they? She asked. Asterian's silence was answer enough. My apartment. My business. Her breath caught. My daughter. We're monitoring the situation, he said quickly. She's safe.
For now.
But Callista. Don't. She held up a hand, needing space to think, to process, to figure out how her entire world had imploded in the span of 2 hours. Just don't. She moved to the windows, pressed her palms against the cool glass, stared out at the ocean that suddenly felt like a barrier instead of an escape. Behind her, she heard Asterian exhale, a sound that carried 15 years of exhaustion. I know what you're thinking, he said quietly. That this is crazy. That I'm lying or delusional or trying to manipulate you. And maybe I am crazy. Maybe I should have let you walk away tonight. But I couldn't. Something in his voice made her turn. He stood in the center of that massive, empty penthouse, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost fragile. Haunted. 15 years ago, I lost someone, Asterian said, and the words came out like broken glass. Her name was Celine. She was my mate. My everything. And Vex killed her because I wasn't strong enough to protect her. The confession cracked something open in Callista's chest. I built this empire in the aftermath, he continued. Made myself untouchable. Surrounded myself with power and money, and enough defenses that no one could ever hurt me again. I stopped letting people in. Stopped feeling anything that could be used as a weapon against me. His eyes found hers, gold and burning and achingly vulnerable. And then you spilled champagne on my suit, looked at me like I was human, and broke through 15 years of walls in 30 seconds. Callista couldn't breathe. I don't understand this, she whispered. I don't understand what's happening. Neither do I. Asterian's voice cracked. But I know that every instinct I have is screaming at me to keep you close. To protect you. To make sure nothing ever touches you the way it touched her. He crossed the space between them, stopping just close enough that Callista had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. So yes, he said, you're in danger. And yes, it's because of me. But Callista, you were in danger the moment we locked eyes. The only question now is whether you'll let me help you survive it. The ocean crashed below. The moon hung suspended in the glass. And between them, something ancient and undeniable pulled taut. Okay, Callista heard herself say. Okay. And just like that, her fate was sealed. Chapter 3. 3 weeks. That's what Asterian had asked for. 21 days to dismantle Vex's operation, eliminate the threat, and give Callista back the ordinary life she'd been living before champagne and fate collided on a Miami rooftop. 3 weeks in a penthouse that felt more like a fortress than a home. 3 weeks with a man who looked at her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning for 15 years. Callista told herself she was being practical, strategic. This wasn't about wanting to stay, it was about survival, about protecting Bryn, about making smart decisions in an impossible situation. But late at night, when she lay in the guest suite Asterian had given her, all silk sheets and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking an ocean that never slept, she admitted the truth. She wanted to be here, wanted it in a way that terrified her. Because wanting things had never ended well for Callista Stormfang. The first morning, she woke to sunlight pouring through glass and the smell of coffee drifting from somewhere beyond her door. She'd pulled on the robe hanging in the closet, cashmere, obscenely soft, probably worth more than her car, and followed the scent to the kitchen. Asterian stood at the counter, hair still damp from a shower, dressed in dark jeans and a white shirt rolled to his elbows. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression shifted.
Softened.
"You're awake," he said, and held out a mug. Black, 2 sugars. Callista froze halfway across the room. "How did you? You ordered it that way at the event. Before the champagne incident." His mouth curved. "I pay attention." She took the mug, fingers brushing his, and that electric shock ran through her again, the one that made her nerve endings light up and her brain short-circuit. 3 days in, and she still wasn't used to it. Wasn't sure she ever would be.
"Thank you," she managed.
They fell into a rhythm after that, one that felt dangerously domestic. Asterion worked from home. Conference calls in his office, laptop open at the dining table, running an empire from behind glass walls while his pack moved through the city like shadows. Callista tried to stay out of his way, but the penthouse wasn't built for hiding. Every room flowed into the next, open and exposed, and she found herself gravitating toward wherever he was. He noticed, of course. Noticed everything. Like how she took her coffee. How she rubbed her temples when she was stressed. How she avoided cilantro in the meals his private chef prepared. Small things. Details a man shouldn't notice about a woman he barely knew. But Asterion didn't look at her like someone he barely knew. He looked at her like he'd been memorizing her face for lifetimes. On the 4th night, Callista made the mistake of joining him on the balcony. The moon hung fat and silver over the ocean, painting the water in shades of mercury and shadow. Miami sprawled below them, alive and glittering, but up here the world felt suspended.
Separate.
Like they existed in a pocket dimension where ordinary rules didn't apply. Asterion stood at the railing, shoulders tense, staring at the moon like it was an enemy he couldn't defeat. "You don't have to stay out here with me," he said without turning around. Callista moved closer anyway. "What if I want to? Tonight's not a good night." "Why not?" He finally looked at her, and his eyes were full wolf gold, brighter than she'd ever seen them, almost glowing. "Because it's 3 days until the full moon," he said quietly. "And I can feel it building.
The pull.
The hunger. The part of me that's not entirely civilized." Callista's pulse kicked up, but not from fear. From something far more dangerous. "Does it hurt?" she asked.
No. His jaw clenched.
"It's more like craving something you know you shouldn't have. Wanting something so badly it rewrites your entire nervous system. The moon calls to the wolf, and the wolf calls to things I've spent 15 years keeping buried." He turned back to the ocean, hands gripping the railing hard enough that Callista heard metal creak. "You should go inside," he said, and his voice had gone rough. Strained. "Before I forget how to be careful around you." Every rational cell in Callista's body agreed. This was the smart move. The safe move. Walk away before whatever was building between them crossed a line neither of them could uncross. But she'd spent 15 years playing it safe. And where had it gotten her? "What if I don't want you to be careful?" she whispered. Asterion went absolutely still. Then slowly, so slowly it felt like watching a storm gather, he turned to face her. The moonlight hit him full on, and Callista saw it clearly now. The way his pupils had blown wide, swallowing the amber. The way his breathing had changed, deeper and slower, like he was measuring each inhale. The way every muscle in his body had gone taut, coiled, ready to spring. "Callista." Her name was a warning and a plea. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." He moved closer, one step, then another, and the air between them crackled with electricity. With want. With something primal that had nothing to do with humanity, and everything to do with the way two souls recognize each other across impossible distances. "I'm asking," Asterion said, voice low and wrecked, "for you to go inside. Because if you stay out here, under this moon looking at me like that," he stopped. Swallowed hard. "I won't be able to stop myself from touching you. And once I start, I'm not sure I'll be able to stop." Callista's heart slammed against her ribs. She should have been terrified. Should have run. Should have remembered that this man was a predator wrapped in expensive clothes, and she was prey who'd wandered willingly into his territory. but all she felt was heat, hunger, a pulse so strong it overrode every self-preservation instinct she possessed. "What scares me," she said, echoing his words from the car that first night, "isn't the wolf. It's how much I feel when I'm near you." Something broke in Asterian's expression. He reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm, calloused, trembling slightly like he was using every ounce of control not to crush her against him. "I've been alone for 15 years, he whispered. "Built walls so high nothing could touch me. And then you walked into my life and shattered every single one in the space of a heartbeat." Callista's breath hitched. "Asterian." "I'm terrified of this," he continued, and the raw honesty in his voice cracked her wide open. "Terrified of wanting you this much. Terrified that if I let myself have you, I'll lose you the way I lost her. Terrified that I'm already too far gone to walk away, even if it would keep you safe." His forehead touched hers, and Callista felt the tremble running through him, control stretched to its absolute limit. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against her lips. "Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me I'm insane, and you want to go home. Give me a reason to let you go." Callista closed her eyes, felt the warmth of his hands, the solidness of his body so close to hers, the pull between them that felt older than stars, and realized she couldn't give him a reason, couldn't walk away, couldn't pretend this wasn't the most real thing she'd felt in decades. "I can't," she whispered. Asterian's grip tightened, just slightly. "Can't what?" "Tell you to stop." The words hung between them for one suspended heartbeat. Then his phone buzzed. Harsh, insistent, shattering the moment like a gunshot. Asterian pulled back, jaw clenched, fury blazing in his eyes, not at Callista, but at the interruption. He yanked the phone from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and every ounce of color drained from his face. "What?" Callista asked, fear spiking cold. "What is it?" He looked up at her, and she saw it. The shift from man to alpha, from vulnerability to lethal focus. "It's a text," he said, voice gone flat and dangerous. "One word." He turned the screen toward her. "Chicago." Callista's world tilted. "My daughter," she breathed. "Bryn." Asterian was already moving, phone to his ear, barking orders in a language Callista didn't understand, pack commands, she realized distantly. Mobilizing his wolves. Calling in favors. Doing whatever it took to keep a 19-year-old college student safe from monsters she didn't know existed. "What happened?" Callista demanded, following him inside. "Is she okay?" "Asterian, tell me." He held up a hand, still listening to whoever was on the other end of the line. Then he lowered the phone, and his expression made her blood run cold. "3 men approached her outside her dorm an hour ago," he said quietly. "Asking questions about you. Where you were. When you'd be back. Whether you had family in Miami." Callista's knees went weak. "Did they?" "She's safe. My people got there before anything happened." But Callista, his eyes held hers, and she saw the truth written in them. This is Vex's opening move. He's not just watching anymore. He's escalating. The room spun. This was her fault. Her daughter was in danger because Callista had spilled champagne and climbed into a car and let herself fall for a man who came with a war attached. "I need to go to her," she said, voice shaking. "Right now. I need to." "No." The word was absolute. "What do you mean, no?" "That's my daughter. And walking into Chicago right now would be walking into a trap." Asterian crossed to her, gripped her shoulders. "Vex wants you to panic. Wants you to run straight to her, so he can take you both. I'm not letting that happen." "Then what do we do?" His eyes blazed gold. "We bring her here, where I can protect you both." And just like that, the fragile agreement they'd made shifted. This wasn't about 3 weeks anymore. This was about survival. And the terrifying realization that Callista was in far too deep to ever find her way back out. Chapter 4. The private jet cut through darkness at 30,000 feet, and Callista couldn't stop shaking. Not from cold. Not from fear. though God knows there was plenty of that churning in her gut. She was shaking because, for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be terrified of losing something before you'd even fully claimed it. Asterion sat across from her in the cabin, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in clipped tones to someone on the ground in Chicago. His pack. His soldiers. The wolves he'd mobilized the moment that text had come through. He'd barely looked at her since they'd boarded. And that silence was eating her alive. "Bryn's at a safe house," he said finally, lowering the phone. His voice was all alpha now, cold, controlled, nothing like the man who'd cupped her face on the balcony and confessed his terror. "3 of my best watching her. She's scared but unharmed." "I need to see her," Callista said. Again. For the 10th time since they'd left Miami. "You will. When I'm certain it won't get both of you killed." The words landed like a slap. Callista's hands curled into fists in her lap. She's 19 years old, Asterion. She doesn't understand what's happening. She's probably terrified, wondering why her mother sent armed strangers to lock her in a house she's never seen. Better terrified and alive than trusting and dead. "Don't talk to me like I'm one of your soldiers." His eyes snapped to hers, gold, blazing, barely human. "Then stop acting like you have any idea what we're walking into." The air between them crackled with tension. Callista stood, crossed the cabin, planted herself directly in front of him. Close enough to see the muscle ticking in his jaw. Close enough to smell cedar and smoke and the barely leashed violence rolling off him in waves. "You don't get to shut me out," she said, voice low and shaking.
"Not now."
"Not after everything you told me on that balcony. I'm trying to keep you safe. By treating me like a liability? By keeping you away from a man who's planning to use you as bait." Asterion surged to his feet, towering over her, and Callista saw it. The razor's edge. He was walking between control and chaos. "You want the truth?
Fine."
Vex didn't send those men to Bryn by accident. He sent them because he knew you'd panic. Knew you'd demand to come here. Knew I'd either refuse and watch you hate me for it, or agree and walk straight into whatever trap he set. Callista's breath caught. "Then why are we going?" "Because staying in Miami meant leaving your daughter exposed. And I won't," his voice cracked. "I won't let another woman I care about die, because I chose wrong." The confession hung between them like a live wire. Another woman. Celine. The mate he'd lost 15 years ago. Callista reached up, slowly, and cupped his face the way she had on the balcony. His skin was burning hot, fever bright, and she felt the tremor running through him. The beast inside straining against chains that were fraying with every passing second. "Tell me about her," she whispered. Asterion's eyes closed. "Callista."
"No."
"You said you'd stop protecting me from the truth.
So tell me."
Tell me about the woman you lost. Tell me why you've been alone for 15 years. Tell me what you're so terrified of are." Epiating. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there with her hands on his face and the weight of 15 years pressing down on both of them. Then he broke. "Her name was Celine," he said, and his voice was raw. "Destroyed. She was brilliant.
Fierce.
Human like you. She didn't know what I was when we met. I kept it hidden, thought I could protect her by keeping her separate from that world. But Vex found out. Saw weakness. Saw opportunity." His hands came up to cover hers, holding them against his face like they were the only thing keeping him anchored. "He took her," Asterion continued. "Used her to draw me into a challenge. Said if I wanted her back, I'd have to face him in front of both packs. Alpha against alpha. Winner takes Miami." Callista's throat tightened. "What happened?" "I went. Of course I went. I would have burned the entire city down to get her back." His eyes opened, and they were drowning in gold and grief. But Vex didn't fight fair. Never has. He had wolves waiting. They grabbed Celine during the fight, and before I could reach her.
He stopped.
Swallowed hard. He slit her throat. Asterion finished. Barely a whisper. Made me watch. Made sure I understood that loving someone in our world meant giving your enemies the perfect weapon to destroy you. Tears burned hot in Callista's eyes. Asterion. I killed him that night. Or thought I did. Put 3 bullets in his chest and left him bleeding out in that warehouse. But somehow the bastard survived. Crawled away. Rebuilt his pack in the shadows while I spent 15 years convincing myself I'd never feel anything again. His forehead dropped to hers, and Callista felt the wetness on his cheeks. And then you spilled champagne on me, he said, voice breaking, and looked at me like I was human, and I felt everything come roaring back. Every emotion I'd buried. Every vulnerability I'd sworn to eliminate. You undid 15 years of armor in 30 seconds, Callista. And it terrifies me. Because history is repeating itself, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive losing you the way I lost her. Callista's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. She'd spent her entire marriage feeling invisible.
Dismissed.
A supporting character in someone else's story. And here was this man, this powerful, dangerous, impossible man. Looking at her like she was the sun, and he'd been living in darkness for decades. I'm not Celine, she said quietly. I know. And you're not the same man you were 15 years ago. His jaw clenched. That doesn't change what Vex will do if he gets his hands on you. Then we don't let him. Callista held his gaze, refusing to flinch. You said I had 2 choices back in Miami. Stay and let you protect me, or go home and pray. But there's a 3rd option you haven't considered. What's that? We fight back. Together. Not as alpha and human. Not as protector and protected. As partners. Something shifted in Asterion's expression.
Surprise. Hope. Fear.
You don't know what you're asking. Then help me understand. She pressed closer, until there was no space between them, until she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. Stop trying to carry this alone. Let me in. All the way in. Or we'll both drown trying to save each other while refusing to admit we're stronger together. The words hung in the air between them, a challenge, a promise, a leap of faith off a cliff neither of them could see the bottom of. Asterion stared at her for a long, suspended moment. Then his mouth crashed against hers. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was 15 years of isolation and grief and desperate, aching need pouring out all at once. His hands buried in her hair, angling her head, deepening the kiss until Callista couldn't tell where she ended and he began. She tasted salt, tears, hers or his, she didn't know. Tasted hunger and hope and something fierce and claiming that rewrote her from the inside out. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Asterion pressed his forehead to hers. If anything happens to you, he started. It won't, Callista. It won't. Because we're going to be smart and strategic, and we're going to keep Bryn safe and end this. Together. He exhaled, shaky, unsteady, more human than wolf. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the word. Learning its shape. The plane began its descent into Chicago. And Callista felt the shift happening inside her, the transformation from woman trying to survive to woman willing to fight for what she wanted. For her daughter. For this impossible connection. For the man who looked at her like she was worth burning the world down for. But as the city lights appeared below them, Asterion's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. Went absolutely still. What? Callista asked, dread pooling cold in her stomach. Intel just came through.
His voice had gone flat.
Lethal. Vex isn't just targeting Bryn. He's orchestrating something bigger. A coordinated attack on 3 of my businesses tonight. Distraction tactics to pull my pack apart while he makes his real move. What's the real move? Asterion's eyes met hers, and she saw the terrible calculation happening behind them. He's forcing me to choose, he said quietly. Between protecting my pack, the wolves I'm responsible for, the territory I've bled for, and protecting you. Callista's breath caught. Because she understood what he wasn't saying. In Asterion's world, an alpha who chose a human over his pack wasn't just weak. He was finished. You have to choose them, she whispered.
No.
Asterion, if you abandon your pack for me. I said no. His grip on her tightened. I'm not losing you. Not to Vex. Not to fate. Not to impossible choices. We find another way. What if there isn't one? The plane touched down with a jolt. Outside, Chicago waited in the winter darkness, cold, unforgiving, hiding enemies in every shadow. And Callista realized with terrifying clarity that the next few hours would decide everything. Whether they survived this. Whether they survived each other. Whether love was strong enough to rewrite the rules of a world built on violence and territory and blood. Asterion stood, pulled her to her feet, held her face in his hands one more time. Whatever happens tonight, he said, voice raw and fierce. Know this. You're mine, Callista Stormfang. And I will burn this entire city down before I let anyone take you from me. Then he kissed her, hard, claiming, desperate, and let her off the plane. Into the war they'd both been trying to avoid. And the choice that would change everything. Chapter 5. Chicago in February was a special kind of cruel. The kind of cold that sliced straight through your coat and settled in your bones. The kind that turned breath to frost and made every step feel like wading through concrete. Callista had forgotten this, forgotten how winter here didn't just arrive, it invaded. The safe house was a converted loft in Pilsen, all exposed brick and industrial windows that rattled in the wind. Asterion's wolves stood guard at every entrance, silent, watchful, radiating the kind of controlled violence that made the air feel thick. And in the center of it all sat Bryn. Her daughter looked smaller than Callista remembered. 19 years old, wrapped in an oversized northwestern sweatshirt, dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and questions no teenager should have to ask. When Callista walked through the door, Bryn launched herself across the room. Mom. The hug was desperate. Trembling. The kind that said, I thought I'd lost you without needing words. Callista held her daughter tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her coconut shampoo, and felt something crack in her chest. This was real. This was what mattered. Not penthouses or private jets or men with impossible secrets. This. I'm okay, Callista whispered. I'm right here. You're safe. But even as she said it, she felt Asterion's presence behind her, solid, immovable, a reminder that safe was a relative term in a world where monsters wore suits and fought wars in the shadows. Bryn pulled back, eyes red. What's happening? Those men, her voice broke. They knew your name, knew where you'd been. And then these other people showed up and told me I had to come here, that I wasn't safe at the dorm, and I didn't know if you were okay, or if... I'm okay, Callista repeated, cupping her daughter's face. I promise. But I need you to trust me.
Can you do that?
Bryn's gaze flickered past her to where Asterion stood near the door, silent and watchful. Is he why this is happening? She asked quietly. Callista's throat tightened. It's complicated. That's not an answer. Bryn. Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. If I'm in danger, I deserve to know why. She was right. Of course she was right. Callista glanced back at Asterion. He gave her the smallest nod, permission, or maybe resignation. Either way, it was her choice. So she told her daughter the truth.
Not all of it.
Not the parts about mates and wolves and transformations under full moons. But enough. Enough about Vex Silverclaw, about the rivalry, about how Callista had accidentally stumbled into the crossfire of something that had been building for years. Bryn listened in silence, face pale, hands twisted in her sweatshirt. When Callista finished, her daughter's first question made her heart stop. Is he dangerous? Callista opened her mouth.
Closed it.
Because how did you answer that? How did you explain that yes, Asterion Darkmoon was dangerous, deadly even, but not to them? He's protecting us, she said finally. That's not what I asked. The air in the loft went still. Asterion moved then, crossing the space with that predatory grace that never quite looked human. He stopped a few feet away, giving Bryn space, and when he spoke his voice was careful. Controlled. Yes, he said simply. I'm dangerous. To people who threaten what's mine. To enemies who cross lines they shouldn't cross. But never to your mother. And never to you. Bryn stared at him, searching his face for lies, for threats, for whatever truth lived behind those amber eyes. "Mom's been through enough," she said, voice shaking but fierce. "If you hurt her, I won't." "You don't know that. I do." Asterian's jaw tightened. "Because I've already lost someone I loved to this world. I won't survive losing another." The raw honesty in his voice seemed to catch Bryn off guard. She looked at her mother, then back at him, and some of the fear in her expression shifted to something else. Understanding, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. The moment broke when one of Asterian's wolves, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like flint, appeared in the doorway. "Alpha," she said quietly. "We have movement. South side. 3 locations." Asterian's entire demeanor changed. Went from man to warrior in a heartbeat. "Vex distraction," he said, already moving toward the door. "Get everyone in position. I want eyes on all 3 sites, and double the guard here." "Wait," Callista caught his arm. "You're leaving?" His eyes met hers, and she saw the war happening behind them. "I have to. If those attacks succeed, I lose territory. Lose pack members. Everything I've built for 15 years collapses. Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. Asterian. You stay here. With Bryn. Where you're protected." His voice left no room for argument. "This is what I do, Callista. This is the world you walked into. Let me handle it." He was shutting her out again. Pulling away. Becoming the alpha who couldn't afford weakness. And Callista felt the distance opening between them like a chasm. "Don't do this," she whispered. But he was already gone. The hours that followed were agony. Callista paced the loft while Bryn sat curled on the couch, laptop open, researching. Always researching. It was how her daughter processed fear, by gathering information, building understanding, trying to make sense of chaos. "Mom," Bryn said suddenly. "Come look at this." Callista crossed to her, looked at the screen. News articles, business journals, tech industry reports, all featuring Asterian's company, his acquisitions, his meteoric rise from nowhere to empire in less than a decade. "He's legitimate," Bryn said, scrolling. "Everything checks out. But look." She clicked to a different tab. Forums, Reddit threads, dark web discussions. People talk about him differently here, about strange things that happen around his properties. Competitors who back down for no reason, rivals who disappear. Callista's stomach twisted. "There's a pattern," Bryn continued, voice dropping. "Every few years, someone challenges him, tries to take what he's built. And they always lose. Always. But not through legal means. They just vanish. Or die in accidents. Or back off so suddenly it doesn't make sense." "What are you saying?" Bryn looked up at her, eyes wide and frightened. "I'm saying maybe the man trying to hurt us isn't the only monster in this story. Maybe the one protecting us is just as dangerous. Maybe more." The words hit like a punch. Because Bryn wasn't wrong. Asterian was dangerous. He'd killed before. He'd admitted as much when he told her about Celine. He'd built an empire through methods that probably didn't hold up to legal scrutiny. He operated in shadows and violence and territory wars that had nothing to do with boardrooms and everything to do with blood. But he'd also held Callista's face in his hands and confessed his terror. Had shown her vulnerability no one else had seen in 15 years. Had looked at her like she was worth rewriting his entire world for. Which version was real? Or were they both real? "I don't know what to tell you," Callista said quietly. "Except that the man I've gotten to know these past few weeks isn't a monster. He's broken. And trying to protect the people he cares about the only way he knows how. Even if that way is violence?" Callista didn't have an answer. The night stretched on. Midnight came and went. Asterian didn't return. Callista tried calling, texting. Nothing. Just silence from the man who'd promised to protect her. At 2 a.m, she finally fell asleep on the couch, Bryn curled beside her. Both of them exhausted and terrified and waiting for news that didn't come. When she woke, the sky outside was still dark. But Asterian's presence beside her was gone. Not just absent.
Gone.
Callista sat up, heart hammering, looked around the loft. The guards were still posted. Bryn was still sleeping. Everything looked normal, except for the piece of paper on the coffee table. Folded once. Her name written across it in sharp, decisive handwriting. Callista's hands shook as she opened it. Callista, Vex gave me an ultimatum. Meet him alone or he starts killing my pack one by one until I do. I can't let that happen. I can't choose between you and them. So I'm making a different choice. I'm ending this tonight. One way or another.
Don't follow me.
Don't try to stop me. If I don't come back, my second-in-command will make sure you and Bryn get home safely. The threat to you ends with me. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to find another way. I'm sorry I let you in just to leave. But I'm not sorry I met you. You reminded me what it feels like to be human. The note fell from Callista's hands. He'd left. While she slept, while she trusted him, while she believed they were facing this together, he'd walked out into the night to confront Vex Silverclaw alone. To die alone. Because he thought that was the only way to protect everyone he loved. Rage and terror warred in Callista's chest. That idiot. That beautiful, self-sacrificing, infuriating idiot. Did he really think she'd just let him go? Did he think she'd wake up, read his goodbye, and accept that he'd chosen to throw his life away rather than trust her enough to fight beside him? She grabbed her coat. Mom. Bryn sat up, groggy. What's wrong? Stay here, Callista said, already moving toward the door. Stay with the guards. Don't leave for any reason. Where are you going? Callista looked back at her daughter. Saw the fear. Saw the questions. Saw 19 years of love and trust and every reason she should stay. But she also saw the note on the table. Saw the man who'd shown her what it meant to be seen. And made her choice. To save someone who thinks he has to save everyone alone, she said. Then she walked out the door. Into the winter darkness. Toward the man who'd stolen her heart. And the war that would decide if love was strong enough to survive. Chapter 6. They say love makes you do crazy things. Callista Stormfang had never believed that until she found herself driving a stolen car through Chicago's South Side at 3 a.m, a tire iron in the passenger seat, and absolutely no plan beyond get to him before it's too late. The warehouse district rose like tombstones against the winter sky, abandoned factories and gutted buildings that the city had forgotten decades ago. Perfect territory for things that preferred to stay hidden. Perfect place for monsters to settle scores. Callista had gotten the location from the silver-haired wolf guarding the safe house. The woman had tried to stop her, argued that going after Asterian was suicide, that she'd be walking straight into Vex's trap. Callista hadn't cared, because the alternative was sitting in that loft, waiting for news that would never come, knowing she'd let the first man in 15 years who'd actually seen her walk to his death alone. Not happening. The car screeched to a stop outside a massive structure, rusted metal, shattered windows, the kind of place where screams would never reach the street. 3 black SUVs were parked outside. Vex's pack. Callista's hands shook as she grabbed the tire iron. This was insane. She was human. Fragile. Armed with nothing but adrenaline and a weapon that would be useless against creatures who could tear through steel. But she'd survived a soul-crushing divorce. Had rebuilt a business from nothing. Had raised a daughter as a single mother while the world tried to convince her she was invisible. She was done being invisible. Callista pushed through the warehouse door. The interior was cavernous. Empty. Moonlight spilled through broken skylights, painting everything in silver and shadow. And in the center of that vast space stood 2 men.
No.
2 wolves. Asterian and Vex Silverclaw. They circled each other like gravity, made flesh. 2 forces that couldn't coexist, couldn't walk away, could only collide until one of them stopped moving forever. Vex was tall, lean, all sharp angles and cruel elegance. Silver hair pulled back. Eyes the color of winter storms. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never losing, never doubting, never questioning whether violence was the answer. Asterian looked like death walking. Blood streaked his face. His shirt was torn, but his eyes. God, his eyes were pure molten gold, burning with something that went beyond rage into territory that had no name. Neither of them had seen her yet. 15 years, Bex was saying, voice smooth as poisoned honey. 15 years you've ruled Miami like some untouchable god. But we both know the truth, don't we, Dark Moon? You're not a god. You're just a man who got lucky. Lucky. Asterian's voice was gravel and fury. Is that what you call surviving your betrayal? I call it inevitable. Vex grinned, all teeth. You were always too soft. Too human. Caring about things that make you weak. It's why you lost Celine. And it's why you'll lose tonight. Asterian lunged. The movement was so fast Callista almost missed it. 1 second he was 10 feet away, the next he had Vex by the throat, slamming him into a concrete pillar hard enough to crack stone. But Vex recovered instantly. Twisted. Broke free. Drove a fist into Asterian's ribs with a sound that made Callista's stomach turn. They were going to kill each other. She stepped forward, tire iron gripped tight, and her footstep echoed in the cavernous space. Both alphas froze.
Turned.
And Callista saw the exact moment Asterian's heart stopped. No, he breathed. No, Callista, what are you? Well. Vex's grin widened, predatory and delighted. The little human who broke the Ice King. I was wondering when you'd make an appearance. He moved toward her, slow, deliberate, a wolf closing in on prey, and every survival instinct Callista possessed screamed at her to run. She didn't. Stay away from her. Asterian's voice had gone beyond threatening into something that sounded like the end of the world. Vex, I swear to God. You'll what? Vex circled Callista, close enough that she could smell copper and earth and something wild. Kill me? You've been trying to do that for 15 years. It hasn't worked yet. His hand shot out, grabbed her wrist. The same way Asterian had that first night on the rooftop, except this touch was cold, calculated, meant to hurt, and Callista felt claws press against her skin. So this is what broke you, Vex mused, tilting his head. A human. Middle-aged.
Ordinary.
How disappointing.
Let
her
go.
Asterian's voice was barely recognizable. The wolf was taking over. Callista could see it in the way his body had gone rigid, in the way gold had completely swallowed his irises, in the way the air around him seemed to shimmer with barely contained violence. Vex laughed. Why would I do that? She's perfect. The exact weakness I've been waiting for. He yanked Callista closer, and she felt claws break skin. Felt blood well hot against her wrist. Saw Asterian's control shatter completely. Here's what's going to happen, Vex continued, ignoring the way Asterian was advancing with murder in his eyes. I'm going to turn her, bite her, force the transformation. And you're going to watch as the woman you love becomes one of us, confused, terrified, trapped between human and wolf. A weapon I can use against you for the rest of your miserable life. Callista's blood ran cold, because she could see it in Vex's eyes. He wasn't bluffing. Or, Vex said, leaning close enough that Callista felt his breath against her neck, you can kneel. Acknowledge me as Alpha.
Give me Miami.
And I'll let her stay human. Let her go back to her ordinary little life. Your choice, Dark Moon. The warehouse went silent. Callista's pulse hammered in her ears. She could feel Vex's claws at her throat now, one wrong move away from ending everything. Could see Asterian frozen 10 feet away, every muscle screaming to move, but knowing that if he did, she'd die before he reached her. This was the trap. The choice Vex had engineered. The impossible decision between power and love, between everything Asterian had built and the woman who'd broken through his walls. And Callista realized something that changed everything. Vex was right about one thing. Love did make you do crazy things. She met Asterian's eyes across the warehouse. Saw the terror. The rage. The helpless, aching love that had rewritten both of them in 3 short weeks. And she smiled. You want him broken? Callista said quietly, and Vex went still. Then you'd have to kill me. And if you do that, she held Asterian's gaze, pouring everything she felt into that look. You won't just face an alpha protecting his territory. You'll face a man with nothing left to lose. Vex's grip tightened. You think I won't? I think you're a coward, Callista said, voice steady even as claws pressed harder against her throat. You've spent 15 years attacking from the shadows, because you know the truth. In a fair fight, you can't beat him. You never could. That's why you killed Celine.
That's why you're using me.
Because you're terrified of what he becomes when he stops holding back. The words landed like grenades. Vex's expression shifted. Surprise, fury, and underneath it all, a flicker of something that looked like fear. Because he knew she was right. A grieving alpha is the most dangerous creature on Earth, Callista continued, and she was talking to Vex but looking at Asterion. No rules. No mercy. No reason to hold back. So go ahead.
Kill me. Turn me.
Do whatever you think will break him. But know that the second you do, you've signed your own death warrant. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Asterion moved. Not toward Vex. Toward her. His eyes locked on Callista's, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not just love. Not just desperation.
Trust.
Let her go, Vex, Asterion said quietly, and his voice had gone eerily calm. Or I stop playing by pack rules. I stop fighting fair. I stop being the alpha who showed you mercy 15 years ago. You're bluffing. Am I? Asterion tilted his head. You want Miami? You can have it. The territory, the businesses, all of it. I don't care anymore. The only thing I care about is standing 3 feet away from you with claws at her throat. Vex hesitated. You'd give up everything? For her? Asterion's smile was terrible, beautiful, in a heartbeat. But here's the thing. You don't actually want me broken.
You want me dead.
And the only way you get that is a fair fight. Alpha to alpha. No hostages. No games. Just you and me, the way it should have been 15 years ago. The warehouse held its breath. Callista felt Vex's claws twitch against her throat. Felt him calculating. Weighing options. Trying to figure out if this was another trap. Winner takes everything, Asterion continued. Miami.
The packs.
And she walks away untouched regardless of who survives. Those are my terms. And if I refuse, then I'll spend every second of the rest of my life hunting you. No mercy. No rules. No pack law to protect you. Just me, and the promise that you'll die screaming. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Vex stared at Asterion for a long, suspended moment. Then, slowly, his claws retracted from Callista's throat. He shoved her forward. She stumbled, and Asterion caught her, pulled her against his chest, one arm banded around her waist, breathing hard like he'd just run a marathon. You're insane, he whispered into her hair. You beautiful, terrifying, insane woman. Learned from the best, Callista whispered back. Vex laughed, cold, cruel, anticipatory.
Fine.
We do this the old way. But when I win, Dark Moon, I want you to know something. His smile was razor-sharp. She's the reason you lost. Loving her made you weak. And that weakness is what kills you. Asterion pulled back just enough to look at Callista. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone, and his eyes, still gold, still burning, held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. He's wrong, Asterion said softly. Loving you made me something I haven't been in 15 years. What's that? His smile was fierce, feral, utterly unafraid, human enough to care, wolf enough to win. Then he kissed her, hard and claiming and desperate, and turned to face Vex's silver claw one last time. 2 alphas. 15 years of blood debt. And the woman who'd just rewritten the rules by refusing to be anyone's weakness. The reckoning had begun. Chapter 7. The fight lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of violence so raw, so primal, that Callista had to turn away twice, not from fear, but from the sheer brutality of watching two apex predators try to erase each other from existence. When it ended, Asterion stood over Vex's unconscious body, chest heaving, blood streaming from a dozen wounds, eyes still burning gold. He hadn't killed him. That was the part that shocked everyone watching. The dozen wolves from both packs who'd materialized from the shadows to witness the challenge. Asterion had won. Had Vex at his mercy. Could have ended it with one strike. But he'd stopped. "You don't deserve a quick death," Asterion had said, voice raw and wrecked. "You deserve to live knowing you lost. That you'll never have Miami. That you'll spend the rest of your miserable existence looking over your shoulder, knowing I'm still out there." Then he turned to Callista, crossed the warehouse floor, and collapsed into her arms. That was 3 days ago. Now they were back in Miami, and Callista couldn't stop watching the ocean. She stood on the penthouse balcony, wrapped in one of Asterion's shirts, coffee cooling in her hands as dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Behind her, through the glass, she could hear him moving through the space. Footsteps she'd learned to recognize, presence she'd learned to crave. He'd barely left her side since Chicago. Barely slept. Barely ate. Just stayed close, like he was afraid if he let her out of his sight for too long, she'd vanish the way Celine had. The sliding door opened. "You're up early," Asterion said quietly, and she felt him step behind her. Not touching, but close enough that his warmth radiated through the morning chill. Couldn't sleep. Nightmares. Questions. She felt him tense. About what? Callista turned, met his eyes, still amber, though lighter now, more human, and saw the fear there. The waiting. Like he knew what was coming and had been bracing for it since they'd boarded the plane home. "What happens now?" she asked. The question hung between them, weighted with everything they hadn't said. Asterion's jaw worked. "That depends on you. Don't put this all on me. I'm not." He moved closer, hands sliding into his pockets like he didn't trust what they'd do if he let them free. "But I need to know what you want, Callista. Because I can give you a dozen different versions of what happens next, but only one of them matters." "Which one?" "The one where you stay." The words landed soft but absolute. Callista's throat tightened.
"Stay."
"Here. With you." "Yes. In this world. With pack politics and territory wars and enemies who'll always see me as a weakness." "Yes." "Asterion. I know what I'm asking." His control cracked just slightly. "I know it's unfair. No, you didn't sign up for any of this. You came to Miami to manage an event, not to fall into a war you didn't understand. And if you want to go back to Chicago, back to your life, back to normal," he stopped. Swallowed hard. "I won't stop you. I'll make sure you and Bryn are protected. Make sure Vex never touches you. And I'll let you go." Just like that.
"No."
The word came out broken. "Not just like that. Letting you go would destroy me. But I'd do it anyway, if that's what you needed." Callista stared at him. At this man who'd shown her what it meant to be seen, not as a supporting character, not as someone's ex-wife, not as invisible, but as someone worth burning the world down for. "What do you want?" she asked. Asterion's eyes blazed. "Don't ask me that." "Why not?" "Because what I want is selfish. Dangerous. Every version of forever I can imagine with you in it." The confession cracked something open in her chest. "Then why do you look like you're preparing to lose me?" "Because I made a decision," he said quietly. "And I need to tell you before you make yours." Dread pooled in Callista's stomach. "What decision?" Asterion exhaled, long, shaky, like a man about to step off a cliff. Then he told her, "I'm stepping down as alpha." The words didn't make sense. Callista blinked, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "I've already spoken to my second-in-command. She'll take over leadership of the pack. The transition happens at the next full moon. You're giving up everything? Your pack, your territory, everything you've built for 15 years. "Yes." "Why?" "Because Vex was right about one thing." Asterion's voice went rough. "As long as I'm alpha, you'll always be a target. Always be the weakness enemies exploit. Always be in danger because of me. But if I step down, if I become just a wolf, no territory, no power, you're safe. Callista's mind spun. You'd give up your entire life for me? In a heartbeat. That's insane. I know. Asterion, you can't just, that's your family. Your purpose. Everything you've bled for. And you're everything I never thought I'd have again. He closed the distance between them, cupped her face in his hands. I've spent 15 years ruling through fear and isolation, convincing myself that power was the only thing that mattered. That if I stayed untouchable, nothing could hurt me. And I was right, nothing did. Because I wasn't living. I was surviving. His forehead touched hers. Then you crashed into my life and reminded me what it feels like to be human. To want something more than territory and revenge. To care about someone enough that their safety matters more than my pride. His voice cracked. So yes, I'm giving it up. All of it. Because I choose you, Callista Stormfang. And I'll keep choosing you for as long as you'll let me. Tears burned hot in Callista's eyes. This man. This impossible, beautiful, self-sacrificing man was willing to dismantle his entire existence for her. And she realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that she couldn't let him. No, she whispered. Asterion went rigid. What? I don't want you to give up your pack. Callista. Listen to me. She pulled back, held his face the way he was holding hers. I spent 15 years making myself smaller. Quieter.
Less.
Shrinking into spaces that were never meant to hold me because I thought that's what love required. Sacrifice. Compromise. Giving up pieces of yourself until there's nothing left. Her voice strengthened. But that's not love. That's just two people slowly erasing each other. And I refuse to let you do that for me. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Her grip tightened. You think stepping down will keep me safe. But it won't. It'll just make you someone you're not. Someone diminished. And I didn't fall for a diminished man, Asterion. I fell for an alpha. Fierce and dangerous and powerful and whole. His eyes searched hers, desperate and disbelieving. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want you to protect me from your world. I want you to let me in. Into your struggles, your responsibilities, your life. All of it. The beautiful parts and the brutal parts and everything in between. That's not safe. I don't care about safe anymore. Callista's voice cracked. I care about real. About honest. About building something together instead of you carrying everything alone because you're terrified of losing me. I am terrified of losing you. Then trust me. She pressed closer until there was no space between them, until she could feel his heartbeat against hers. Trust that I'm strong enough to stand beside you. Trust that I chose this, chose you, knowing exactly what it meant. Stop trying to save me from yourself, and just let me love you. The words hung in the air between them, raw and exposed and irrevocable. Asterion stared at her like she'd just rewritten the laws of physics. You want to stay, he said slowly, like he was testing the words. In Miami. With me. In this world. Yes. Even though it's dangerous. Yes. Even though you'll always be connected to pack politics and territory disputes and enemies who might use you to get to me.
Yes.
Callista smiled through tears. Because the alternative is going back to Chicago and spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to choose something that terrified me. Asterion's control shattered. He kissed her, desperate and claiming and full of 15 years of loneliness finally breaking apart. His hands buried in her hair, angling her head, deepening the kiss until Callista couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the overwhelming rightness of this moment. When they finally broke apart, both shaking, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync, Asterion whispered the question that changed everything. Will you let me love you, even if it costs us everything? Callista's answer was immediate. Certain. Irrevocable. Yes. They spent the rest of the day on that balcony, talking through logistics, through fears, through the thousand tiny details of building a life that spanned two worlds. Callista would split her time between Chicago and Miami, would rebuild her business here, where Asterian's connections could help her thrive instead of just survive. Bryn would visit during breaks, would slowly be brought into the truth, would learn that her mother had chosen something extraordinary over something safe. Asterian would remain alpha, but differently, with Callista beside him, not as a weakness, but as a partner. Someone who could see the human in the wolf and remind him why both mattered. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, enemies, moments where they'd both question whether they were strong enough to make this work. But as the sun set over Miami and they sat facing each other on the balcony floor, knees touching, hands intertwined, Callista realized something profound. True strength wasn't isolation. It was letting someone see every broken part of you and choosing to trust them anyway. "I see you," she whispered, echoing the words from that first night in the warehouse. "All of you, the alpha and the man, the fierce and the fragile. And I'm not going anywhere." Asterian's eyes blazed gold. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Because she was. And for the first time in 15 years, Asterian Darkmoon wasn't alone. He was home. Chapter 8. They say werewolves mate for life. Callista Stormfang used to think that was mythology. Romance novel fantasy. The kind of thing that sounded beautiful on paper but crumbled under the weight of real life, real problems, real human complexity. 6 months after Chicago, she knew different. It wasn't mythology. It was a promise. The kind written in shared coffee at dawn and whispered conversations at midnight. In the way Asterian still watched her like she was the only thing in the room worth seeing. In the way she'd learned to read his silences, to know when the alpha needed space and when the man needed her close. Miami had become home in a way Chicago never had. Callista's business was thriving. Event coordination and consulting for Asterian's network of companies, projects that challenged her instead of just paying bills. She'd hired a small team, rented office space in a building Asterian owned but refused to let her pay for, built something that was entirely hers while being supported by someone who wanted to see her succeed. It was intoxicating,
Terrifying.
everything she'd never let herself want during 15 years of marriage to a man who'd seen her as decoration instead of partner. The pack had accepted her. Eventually. Not easily. There'd been resistance, suspicion, wolves who thought a human mate made their alpha weak. But Callista had proven them wrong. Had sat in on pack meetings, offered perspectives they'd never considered, reminded Asterian when he was being too rigid, and backed him when he needed to be fierce. She wasn't just the alpha's mate. She was his equal. And slowly, grudgingly, the pack had started to see what Asterian had known from that first night on the rooftop. She belonged. November brought Bryn for Thanksgiving break. Callista had been nervous, her daughter had been supportive from a distance, but actually visiting, actually seeing this new life up close was different. Bryn was still processing. Still reconciling the mother she'd known with this woman who'd chosen danger and werewolves and a love that defied every rational explanation. They'd picked her up from the airport together, Asterian and Callista, and the ride back to the penthouse had been awkward. Stilted. Bryn asking careful questions. Asterian answering with careful honesty. But on Thanksgiving morning, something shifted. Callista had woken early to prep the meal, turkey, stuffing, all the traditional chaos she'd done alone for years, and found Bryn already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, looking out at the ocean with an expression Callista couldn't quite read. "Couldn't sleep?" Callista asked, joining her. Still adjusting to the time change. Bryn turned, studied her mother with eyes that saw too much. "You look different." "Different how?"
Happy.
Bryn's voice was quiet, wondering. Like, actually happy. Not just okay. Not just surviving. Actually alive. Callista's throat tightened. "I am. Because of him? Because of a lot of things." Callista poured her own coffee, chose her words carefully.
But yes.
"Partly because of him. Because he sees me in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Bryn was silent for a long moment. Then, Dad never looked at you like that. The truth landed soft but absolute. No, Callista agreed. He didn't. Asterion does. Like you're, Bryn stopped. Swallowed. Like you're everything. He makes me feel that way. Does he make you feel safe? The question surprised her. Callista glanced toward the bedroom where Asterion was still sleeping, or pretending to sleep, giving them space for a conversation they needed to have. Safe isn't the right word, Callista said slowly. What we have isn't safe. It's intense and complicated and sometimes terrifying. But he makes me feel seen, valued. Like I matter in a way that has nothing to do with what I can do for him and everything to do with who I am. Bryn's eyes shimmered. I'm glad, Mom.
I really am.
I worry. I know. But if this is what you want. Bryn reached out, squeezed her hand. If he makes you happy, then I'm trying. To understand. To accept. To see what you see in him. Callista pulled her daughter into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her coconut shampoo, feeling grateful beyond words. Thank you, she whispered. That night, over turkey and wine and stories that carefully avoided anything supernatural, Callista watched Asterion charm her daughter. Watched Bryn slowly relax, laugh at his dry humor, ask questions about his businesses that showed genuine interest instead of suspicion. And when they were cleaning up, Bryn had pulled Callista aside and said the words that changed everything. He makes you happy, Mom. I can see it. And that's all I've ever wanted for you. December arrived with unseasonable warmth and a restlessness in Asterion that Callista had learned to recognize.
He was planning something.
She could see it in the way he disappeared for hours with his second-in-command, in the mysterious phone calls he took on the balcony, in the way he'd watch her across the penthouse with an expression that looked like a man memorizing something he was afraid to lose. On Christmas Eve, he'd woken her before dawn. Get dressed, he'd said, amber eyes bright. I want to show you something. They'd taken his car, the same midnight black Rolls-Royce from that first night, and driven through sleeping Miami streets until they reached the venue, the rooftop where they'd met. Callista's breath caught as they stepped out of the elevator. The space had been transformed. Thousands of lights strung across the railings, casting everything in warm gold. The ocean stretched infinite beyond the glass barriers. And in the center of it all, a single table set for two. Asterion, she started. 6 months ago, he interrupted, and his voice was unsteady in a way she'd never heard. You crashed into my life and broke through 15 years of walls I'd built to keep the world out. You saw me. Not the alpha. Not the monster. Not the empire.
Me.
And you chose to stay even when every rational reason said you should run. He took her hands, and Callista felt them trembling. I've been alone for so long, Asterion continued, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to want someone beside me. To trust someone with every broken part of myself. To believe that love could be something other than a weapon my enemies use against me. He dropped to one knee. Callista's world stopped. You taught me that true strength isn't isolation, he said, and his eyes were blazing gold and achingly vulnerable. It's letting someone see every flaw, every fear, every piece of you that's still bleeding, and trusting them not to weaponize it. You taught me that being human doesn't make me weak. It makes me whole. He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the lights like a captured star. Callista Stormfang, Asterion whispered, and his voice cracked. Will you be my forever? Not because I'm perfect. Not because this will be easy. But because we're both brave enough to choose something terrifying and real over something safe and empty. Tears streamed down Callista's face. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago.
Divorced.
Invisible. Convinced her best years were behind her, and all that remained was survival. She thought about the woman she'd become.
Fierce. Seen.
Building a life that felt like hers instead of something she was borrowing. And she thought about this man kneeling in front of her. Powerful and broken, and willing to risk everything for the chance to love her wholly. Yes, she said, and her voice didn't shake. Yes, I'll be your forever. Asterion surged to his feet, sliding the ring onto her finger, and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Like she was home and sanctuary and every answer to questions he'd stopped asking years ago. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, foreheads pressed together under Miami stars, Callista whispered the question that had started everything. So, what happens now? Asterion grinned, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Now. He pulled her closer, swaying to music only they could hear. Now we rewrite the rules. Build something that's never existed before. A partnership between alpha and human. Between power and vulnerability. Between two people brave enough to admit they're better together than they ever were alone.
That sounds terrifying.
It sounds perfect. Callista laughed, the sound echoing across the rooftop where champagne and fate had collided 6 months ago. Where an ordinary woman had crashed into an extraordinary man and both of them had been irrevocably changed.
I love you, she said.
Simple. True. Everything. I love you, Asterion replied. And I'll keep loving you through every full moon and territory dispute and impossible choice. Through every moment you remind me what it means to be human. Through every lifetime we have together. Werewolves mate for life, Callista murmured. Yes. That's a long time. His eyes blazed. Not long enough. They stayed on that rooftop until dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Stayed until the city woke beneath them and the future stretched infinite and terrifying and impossibly beautiful. And when they finally left, hand in hand, ring catching the light, two souls who'd recognized each other across impossible distances, Callista knew something profound. The best love stories aren't the ones that follow the script. They're the ones brave enough to burn it. To choose danger over safety. To build something new instead of settling for something familiar. To look at someone who's everything you never expected and say yes anyway. Because love, real love, the kind that rewrites you from the inside out, doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for courage. And Callista Stormfang had never felt braver. 6 months ago, she'd spilled champagne on a billionaire's suit and thought her life was over. Turned out it was just beginning. With a wolf who'd taught her how to howl at the moon. And a love that refused to follow anyone's rules but their own. This is Gracie Werewolf Story Bank, where love bites back and second chances come with fangs. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to choose something that sets your soul on fire, that middle age is just the beginning of your most dangerous chapter, that the right person will see every broken piece of you and call it beautiful, then you understand why stories like Callista and Asterion's matter. Subscribe if you want more stories that prove love doesn't have an expiration date. Comment your country if you're still watching but refusing to hit that button. I genuinely want to know what's stopping you. And remember, the best parts of your life might still be waiting on a rooftop in Miami, under a crescent moon, with someone who looks at you like you're magic. Choose brave. Choose real. Choose the love that terrifies you. Because that's the one worth having.